The smell drifted through the cobbled streets before dawn, warm and sweet, like golden clouds made of cinnamon and sugar. In the sleepy town of Brindlewick, where lamplight flickered softly against misty windows, there was one place that never slept. A little corner shop with a crooked sign that read, Maisie's Marvels, always glowing, always open, even when the stars blinked awake before the sun. A cart rolled past, with squeaky wheels and clinking bottles. A cat with marmalade fur curled atop a barrel outside, eyes half closed but ears twitching. From within the bakery, the sounds came gentle rustling, the clatter of pans, and the rhythmic swish-swish of a wooden spoon stirring something thick and magical. Most believed it was run by an old woman with flour in her hair and honey in her voice, but no one had ever quite seen her arrive or leave. No matter the hour midnight storms or golden afternoons, the bakery doors stood wide open, warm light spilling onto the cold street like melted butter. Children whispered stories of gingerbread that could hum lullabies and muffins that giggled when no one was looking. Some claimed that once, just once, a cookie blinked at them before vanishing into a swirl of sugar smoke. Grown-ups smiled at the tales, brushing them off like flour dust. But every single person in Brindlewick, young and old, knew one thing for sure: the bakery had never, ever closed. And one day, a small boy named Eli, with scruffy boots and too many questions, decided he would find out why. Eli had always been curious, the kind of child who peeked under hedges to see where the bugs went and counted the stars until his eyes drooped shut. He lived with his grandmother, Nana Roo, in a tiny red-roofed cottage at the edge of Brindlewick, where the hills met the sky. Every morning on his way to school, he passed Maisie's Marvels. And every morning, without fail, the door was open, the air was sweet, and a tiny silver bell chimed, even if no one had touched it. But something had changed. Lately, Eli had noticed something strange. The lights in the bakery flickered not just with golden warmth, but with shifting colors, soft purples, deep blues, and glimmering greens like the colors of a dragonfly's wings. The smell, too, had grown richer, more mysterious. There were hints of things he didn't recognize, like candied starlight or roasted moonberries, if those were even real. One Tuesday, just before winter, Eli made a plan. He would stay up all night, hidden across the street, under the shadow of Mr. Plan and Topper's umbrella stand, and watch. He would see who came to the bakery, who left, and maybe, just maybe, who Maisie really was. The night came with cold breath and owl songs. Wrapped in his thickest scarf, Eli tucked himself into the shadows. The bakery's windows glowed gently, the door still open, a trail of warm air spilling into the frosty darkness. Midnight passed. Then 1 o'clock. Then 2. Nothing. Then, just before 3, the bell above the bakery door chimed, not softly, but like a song. A shape appeared, no taller than Eli himself. It shimmered, as though made from smoke and light, with eyes like glowing coals and fingers long and fine. The creature stepped out of the bakery, holding a round loaf of bread that glowed softly in its hands. With quiet grace, it floated down the street and disappeared into the night mist. Eli blinked hard, rubbing his eyes, but the street was empty. Only the scent of the bread lingered in the air, warm and buttery. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, while Nana Roo hung laundry and sang to the birds, Eli asked carefully if she knew who Maisie was. She only smiled and said the bakery had been there since before she was born, always open, always baking. When he pressed her, she paused and told him that long ago, when she was a child, her own father had once said, "The bakery doesn't stay open for money, dear. It stays open for something far older." That night, Eli returned, and the next, each time, a different creature visited the bakery. Some small and quick, some floating like lanterns, others creeping silently on paws or claws or hooves. One wore a crown of frost and melted into snowflakes after taking a single jam tart. Another coiled like smoke around the doorway, whispering something into the walls before vanishing. All of them took something sweet, something warm, and disappeared into the night. On the 4th night, Eli couldn't wait anymore. Heart pounding, he crossed the street and stepped inside. The air inside was golden and thick with warmth. Shelves were stacked high with pastries, cakes, and breads that shimmered faintly, as though brushed with starlight. A round table in the center bore a single pie that seemed to hum a quiet tune. Behind the counter, where he expected to find anyone there, was only a wooden spoon, stirring a bowl all by itself. Eli crept forward, eyes wide. The spoon paused, as if sensing him, then began stirring again, slower this time. He whispered an apology, though no one had spoken. Then, from behind the counter, a soft creaking noise, like the stretching of old wood, and out stepped a woman. Her hair was long and silver, her eyes soft and deep, like warm bread fresh from the oven. She wore an apron dusted in flour, and though she looked kind, there was something in her gaze that made Eli feel very small and very seen. "Maisie, at last." She said nothing. Instead, she nodded toward the back of the bakery, and Eli followed. Behind a curtain of braided dough and candied vines was a hallway that shimmered with golden dust. At the end, a spiral staircase led down and further still, until the warmth of the oven above faded into cool silence. What he saw next stole the breath from his lungs. A room the size of a barn stretched before him, lit by glowing jelly jars that hovered in the air. Along the walls were tiny doors, dozens, maybe hundreds each, marked with a different symbol: a cloud, a feather, a claw, a wing. And from each door came creatures, all like the ones he had seen outside, only now he saw clearly. Some were old, with mossy beards and candle eyes. Some were young, flickering with magic. All of them waited in line, calm and quiet. At the center of the room stood an enormous oven, carved into the stone floor, with shifting flames inside that were not just red and orange, but silver and green and deep, midnight blue. Beside it stood Maisie, rolling dough on a table with hands that moved like music. One by one, the creatures stepped forward, received something warm, a pastry, a loaf, a cake, and stepped through another door that led who knows where. Maisie turned to Eli and offered him a tiny tart, no bigger than his thumb. It shimmered like a star. He bit into it, and suddenly he saw not with his eyes, but with his heart. The bakery was a doorway, not just to other places, but to hope, to comfort, to healing. The sweets were not ordinary. They held something ancient. They brought peace to the lonely, rest to the weary, light to the lost. That was why it never closed. Because the world, in every corner, always needed that kind of magic. Eli swallowed the last crumb, tears brimming in his eyes, not from sadness, but from something too big to name. Maisie gave him a soft smile, the kind that wraps around you like a warm blanket, and led him back upstairs. Before he stepped outside, she handed him a small basket with a lid made of braided cinnamon bark. He took it with both hands, knowing somehow that it wasn't just for him. That night, he didn't watch the bakery from the shadows. He walked the misty streets, stopping at houses where he knew hearts were heavy. Mrs. Pinner, who missed her husband. Little Lark, who cried at school every day. Old Mr. Bell, whose house was always dark. At each doorstep, he left something from the basket. A roll, a tart, a cake that smelled of sunshine. And when he returned home, the basket was empty. But his heart felt full. The next morning, the bakery door was still open. The bell still chimed, and Eli, with flour on his fingers and wonder in his chest, finally understood. The snow came early that year. It fell silently over Brindlewick, covering rooftops in soft white blankets and icing the trees like sugar cookies. The town glowed with lanterns and candles, the bakery's warmth more inviting than ever. But even as the townspeople gathered around fires and mugs of cocoa, a coldness deeper than winter crept quietly across the land. Eli felt it first, a strange tightness in the air, like the sky was holding its breath. The lights in Maisie's windows flickered not with golden joy, but with a pale, flickering silver. The bell still rang, but its sound was thinner, sharper. That night, when Eli returned to the bakery, his footsteps leaving tiny prints in the snow, Maisie met him at the door. Her eyes were different, still kind, but troubled. She guided him inside, and he saw what she would not say. The shelves were almost bare. The great oven in the basement glowed dimly, its flame guttering like a candle in the wind. The magical spoon lay still on the counter, resting on its side, and the line of creatures in the underground hall had slowed to a trickle. Those who came looked weary, their glow faded, their eyes dim. Something was wrong. Maisie placed a hand gently on Eli's shoulder and led him to the back room once more. The spiral staircase groaned as they descended, the glowing jars above flickering uncertainly. In the great hall, a hush hung over everything. The doors that once shimmered with promise now sat quiet and dark. Maisie pointed toward the great oven, then to a small door high on the far wall, a door that had never been there before. It was shaped like a crescent moon, and a strange cold wind whispered from its seams. Eli stepped closer and felt it a tug, like a string pulling on his heart. Maisie handed him a round loaf, still warm, marked with a single golden swirl. Then she gently pushed him toward the staircase that spiraled up to the moon-shaped door. Eli climbed. Each step creaked beneath his boots. As he reached the top, the door opened with a sigh. Cold rushed out, stinging his cheeks. Beyond the threshold lay a land of ice and fog, where shadows moved slowly beneath gray skies and nothing grew. He stepped forward. The world beyond was silent. No birds, no wind, no footsteps but his own. The ground cracked beneath him like frozen glass. He walked for what felt like hours, clutching the loaf, heart thudding. Then, through the mist, a shape appeared. At first, he thought it was a tree tall and black, with twisted limbs. But as he neared, he saw it was a creature, older than anything he had ever imagined. Its face was long and thin, its eyes sunken like dark wells. Its fingers were sharp and frozen, curling around a broken crown of icicles. This was the reason the warmth was fading. The creature turned to him, and Eli felt the cold not just in his skin, but in his thoughts, in his bones. It spoke without sound, and its voice filled the air around them like cracking ice. Why do you bring light where there should be none? Eli's breath formed clouds that hung in front of him. His fingers tightened around the loaf. Because there are hearts that need it? The creature stepped forward. Its shadow fell across the snow like a shroud. The world has grown cold. Let it rest. Eli shook his head. The loaf in his hands began to glow faintly, gold flickering through the crust. It doesn't need to rest, he thought. It needs to feel again, to remember warmth. The creature reached out a claw, touching the loaf. A hiss of steam rose, and for a moment, the crust cracked, as if resisting. But then, slowly, a scent rose: butter and spice, sweetness and memory. The creature shuddered. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, with a sound like breaking ice, the creature pulled away. Its form trembled, melting at the edges. Its eyes, still dark, softened slightly. And from its chest, a tiny light appeared, a flicker, like the first spark of a flame. It turned away, sinking slowly into the snow and fog. The cold eased, the mist lifted, and where it had stood, a single tree began to grow, silver bark, golden leaves trembling in the quiet. Eli turned and ran. Through the mist, back to the door, down the spiral stairs. As he burst into the great hall, the oven blazed to life with a roar of light and color. The wooden spoon flew into the air, stirring with joy. The shelves above filled with sweets, bubbling with magic. The doors in the wall glowed once more. One by one, creatures emerged, blinking in surprise, eyes wide with wonder. They stepped forward, drawn by the warmth that had returned. Maisie stood beside the oven, hands folded, eyes full of light. She said nothing, but her smile wrapped around Eli like a quilt. He fell to his knees, not in weariness, but in awe. He had not battled the cold with fire or fists, but with kindness, with a gift meant to bring joy, and that had been enough. Above, in the town of Brindlewick, the snow had stopped. The stars peeked through the clouds, and one by one, windows began to glow again, not just with lanterns, but with hearts warmed from within. And the bell above Maisie's door sang once more, full and clear, its melody echoing through the night. The next morning, Brindlewick awoke to a strange and wonderful stillness. The kind of hush that comes not from silence, but from peace. Snow blanketed the rooftops like frosting, soft and unbroken, except for the gentle trail of small footprints that wound through the village, leading from doorstep to doorstep. And at the end of that trail, glowing warmly in the early light, stood Maisie's marvels open, as always. But something was different now. Inside, the shelves overflowed with treats more beautiful than ever, buns with sparkles like dew, cookies that glowed faintly at their edges, and loaves that sang in the oven's warmth. The wooden spoon danced in the air, swirling ribbons of honey into batter. The air was thick with scents that made hearts swell and memories stir. And in the center of it all stood Eli, apron dusted with flour, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Maisie moved quietly beside him, not with the tired slowness of age, but with the calm grace of someone whose work had always been done with love. She did not speak, not in words, but in every movement, the way she folded the dough, the care in her hands as she sprinkled cinnamon, the smile that stayed in her eyes. Eli now understood what it meant to be part of the bakery, not just to bake, but to notice, to feel the world's quiet needs and answer them with sweetness. That morning, he prepared a basket of pastries, carefully wrapped in golden paper, and carried it through the village. First to Mrs. Pinner, who opened her door with surprise and tears that sparkled brighter than frost. Then to little Lark, whose laughter returned with the taste of a soft jelly bun. To old Mr. Bell, whose lonely house flickered with candlelight, again after he tasted the warm apple tart placed gently by his window. Word spread, as things do in small towns. People began to gather outside the bakery, not in loud crowds, but in quiet wonder. They left notes of thanks, drawings from children, tiny potted plants, and scarves knit by grateful hands. And while most still didn't know the full truth about the creatures, or the glowing doors, or the old shadow in the cold land, they felt it, that something magical lived inside that place, and that it had touched their lives. As winter melted into early spring, the bakery became more than a shop. It was a place where sorrows were softened and joys were shared. People brought their worries and walked away lighter, not always because of the treats, but because of the way the air itself seemed to listen, to care. Eli returned each day after school, and sometimes even before. He learned to knead with his whole heart and how to tell with a single touch if a dough was ready. He learned the rhythm of the oven's hum and how to gather spices from the secret cupboard where each jar glowed with quiet magic. He never asked for anything in return, because what he received, wonder, purpose, and the warm smile of Maisie, was more than enough. One evening, as fireflies blinked in the hedges and the last customer left with a box tied in blue ribbon, Maisie beckoned him to the back once more. They walked past the curtain of candied vines, down the spiral staircase, now lined with tiny lanterns. In the great hall, the doors still shimmered and the oven still glowed, but the room was quieter now, not empty, just peaceful. Maisie led him to a small table near the wall, where a single book lay closed, its cover marked with the same golden swirl that had been baked into the bread he carried to the cold land. She placed her hands gently on top, then looked at him with eyes full of something deeper than words. Not pride, not farewell, but something in between. Then she stepped back. Eli opened the book. Its pages were filled with recipes, yes, but also stories, names of creatures, and places he had never heard, written in curling script, symbols like the ones on the doors, drawn in sugar ink. There were notes in the margins, like whispers from 1,000 bakers who had come before. Some pages glowed faintly, others shimmered when touched. But on the very last page was something simple, a small mirror. Eli looked into it and saw not just his own reflection, but himself kneading dough, passing cakes to strangers, laughing with Maisie, placing warm rolls on snowy doorsteps. He saw every quiet kindness, every little moment stitched together like stars into a constellation of purpose. He closed the book. Maisie smiled. The lights in the hall flickered once, not in warning, but in blessing. Then she turned and walked to one of the glowing doors. As she reached it, she paused, hand resting gently on the frame. Without looking back, she stepped through. The door shimmered once, then faded into the wall like sugar dissolving in tea. And just like that, Maisie was gone. Eli stood alone, but he did not feel lonely. He carried the book back upstairs, placed it on the counter, and lit the lamps for evening. The bell above the door sang its gentle note, and the scent of rising dough filled the room once more. Outside, stars blinked overhead. The world turned, soft and slow. And the bakery, Maisie's marvels, now Eli's care, remained open, always. For there would always be hearts in need of sweetness, nights in need of warmth, and children with too many questions who might, one day, step inside and find the magic waiting. The bakery never closed, because kindness never does.